I sat 2 rows behind them, my ex, his new wife, and his mother, all dressed like they were the ones being honored. I was alone, just me, holding my son's program and shaking hands. My palms were sweaty, my back stiff from standing shifts, but I came early, hoping to be invisible. And still I heard her. "She's only here to take the credit," Dolores hissed, my ex's mother, her voice sharp enough to slice. Martin laughed. Not just a smirk or a chuckle, a full laugh, like he really thought it was funny. "I did all the hard work," he said. "She just showed up." I looked down at my shoes. I didn't say a word. Not because it wasn't a lie, but because I didn't know if anyone around me would believe the truth anyway. I hadn't been the one who showed up in a designer dress or donated to the university or gotten a reserved seat up front. No one had saved me a seat at all. I was just the mom who'd shown up tired, the one with the secondhand dress and old shoes, the one who worked 3 jobs so my son could graduate debt-free. But none of them knew that. No one saw that part. I swallowed the knot rising in my throat and stared at the stage, willing myself to stay focused. This day was for my son, no one else. I told myself that 100 times on the train ride in. I'd skip 2 shifts to be here. I couldn't let them ruin this for me, not again. The ceremony started. Applause broke out. Graduates began filing in. And then the dean stepped forward to introduce the valedictorian. This year's student speaker has dedicated his academic journey to someone who worked tirelessly behind the scenes, he said, voice carrying across the stadium. Someone who made enormous sacrifices so that he could stand where he is today. This speech is for her. People turned their heads, curious. I sat still. Then my son walked across the stage. And just before he opened his mouth to speak, he turned, locked eyes with me, and pointed. "That's my mom," he said, "Elena Ramos. She's the reason I'm here." The crowd turned toward me. My chest tightened. Dolores stopped smiling. Martin's face fell. And for the first time in years, I wasn't invisible. I was seen. The morning of Isaac's graduation, I woke up before the sun. The apartment was still and quiet, the kind of silence that lets you hear the tiny sounds you're usually too tired to notice. The ticking of the clock above the kitchen door, the soft hum of the old fridge, the gentle creak of the floorboard near the hallway. I made a cup of instant coffee and stood at the window while it brewed. From my 4th-floor apartment in the Bronx, I could just make out the city waking up. Buses hissed to life, shopkeepers raised their metal gates, and a neighbor below argued with someone on the phone. The world carried on like it always did, indifferent. But not me. Today wasn't just another morning. Today, my son was graduating from Hamilton University. Full scholarship, valedictorian, no debt, he did it. And I was going to be there. I laid his 1st-grade drawing on the table while I drank my coffee. He'd drawn us holding hands in front of a tiny house. Stick figures, smiley faces. He'd written, "I love my mom because she's strong." I kept that paper tucked in a drawer with rent receipts, job offers, and pay stubs I never had time to sort. A reminder that it had been worth it. I ironed my dress 3 times before I put it on. Navy blue, simple, a little too tight around the arms, but the best one I owned. I'd worn it to every important moment in his life. Parent-teacher meetings, honor roll ceremonies, college move-in day. It was worn thin in the back, but I didn't care. It was mine and I had earned it. The train ride to campus took an hour and 20 minutes. I clutched my purse like it held something precious, though it was just a Metro card, a bottle of water, and the program they mailed to parents. I held the edges like it might fall apart in my hands. My fingers trembled a little. Maybe it was nerves. Maybe it was just the weight of everything that had led to this one day. When I arrived, I realized quickly that this was not going to be my space. The campus lawns were packed with families holding balloons and signs. People were laughing, taking selfies, clapping for their graduates. I stood quietly near the back entrance until the ushers began seating people. They asked for last names. I gave mine. They looked confused. "He's listed under Green," one said. I nodded. I knew that. My son had kept his father's last name. I never asked him to change it. I didn't want to burden him with that choice. But hearing it spoken out loud like I didn't belong there, it hit harder than I expected. The usher directed me to general seating, 2 rows behind the reserved section. No name placard, no family welcome packet, No thank you for raising this brilliant student. Just a folding chair. From my seat, I could see Martin in the front row. His arm was draped around his new wife, Abigail, blonde, glossy, not much older than Isaac. Beside her sat Dolores, her pearl earrings glinting in the sunlight. She didn't smile. She never had. I hadn't seen Martin in nearly 8 years, not since he stopped showing up for birthdays and forgot to send a card the year Isaac turned 16. Back then, he said he was going through a rough patch, that he needed time to sort himself out. I waited. I answered his calls. I let Isaac talk to him even when the conversations were short and full of promises that never turned into action. Eventually, the calls stopped too. By then, I was working nights, cleaning offices downtown, and mornings waitressing at a diner on 3rd Avenue. On weekends, I took care of a sweet old woman named Mrs. Levin, who needed help getting dressed and eating. Her daughter paid me in cash under the table. I didn't ask questions. I needed the money. Isaac always understood. He never complained when I missed a school play or showed up late to his soccer game still wearing my uniform. He'd smile, run over, and hug me like I was the only person in the crowd who mattered. And now, here we were, 2 rows apart, but a lifetime in between. I looked around at all the proud parents, the ones who came in pairs, holding hands, squeezing shoulders. I wondered if they ever had to decide whether to pay rent or buy school shoes. I wondered if any of them had spent nights crying in the bathroom so their child wouldn't hear. I didn't want to feel bitter. This was Isaac's day. He earned this. He deserved to see everyone smiling, clapping, cheering. He deserved joy, and I was determined to give him that even if no one saw me, even if no one knew. So I sat quietly. I held the program in my lap and looked for his name. Isaac Ramos Green, Bachelor of Science, summa cum laude, valedictorian. I read it 3 times. That name may not have been fully mine, but the work behind it was. Every hour, every dollar, every broken promise I'd swallowed to keep moving. That was mine. And even if no one said it out loud, I knew what I'd done to get him here. He was my son. And this was our victory. The sun was hot on my shoulders, but I barely noticed. My hands were folded tightly in my lap as the rows around me filled in. Parents leaned in to whisper to their kids, couples posed for photos, siblings laughed as they adjusted each other's caps and gowns. I stayed quiet, clutching the program like it was a lifeline. I glanced up just in time to see Martin turn to look behind him. His eyes swept past me without stopping. If he recognized me, he didn't show it. His hair was grayer than I remembered, trimmed neatly, his jaw clean-shaven. He looked like the kind of man people believed when he said he'd done his best. He always had that gift. People trusted him, listened to him, believed his version of the story. Dolores leaned toward him and whispered something. I couldn't hear it clearly, but the way she glanced in my direction made it obvious. Then I heard her more clearly. She's only here to take the credit. Martin chuckled and shook his head. Please, I did all the hard work. She was barely around. I flinched, not from the words themselves. I had heard worse, but from how easily they fell out of his mouth. So smooth, so casual, like none of it cost me anything. I thought of every night I walked home after midnight, sore and aching, only to wake up 3 hours later to make Isaac breakfast. I remembered the weeks I went without eating a proper meal so I could stretch groceries to the end of the month. I remembered selling my wedding ring at a pawn shop in Queens just to pay for Isaac's first college textbooks. And here he was, laughing like I had done nothing. I sat back in my chair, heart pounding. I didn't know if anyone else had heard him, but even if they hadn't, the words hung in the air, sharp and heavy. She was barely around. That was the version of me they believed, the one who disappeared, the one who failed, the one who didn't care. My throat tightened. I wanted to stand up and scream the truth. I wanted to list every job, every sacrifice, every moment I had carried our son's life on my back without asking for help. But I didn't. I stayed still, because the story wasn't about me. That's what I kept telling myself. The ceremony began. The university president welcomed everyone. A choir sang. The dean gave a speech about perseverance and gratitude. I tried to listen, but my thoughts were spiraling. All I could think about was how easily they had erased me. Dolores clapped politely at every name called. smiling when the cameras passed over their row. Martin leaned back like he belonged there, like this success was his birthright. His wife Abigail took photos on her phone as if she'd helped raise him too. I felt like I was watching strangers celebrating a life they hadn't earned. My stomach churned. For a second, I thought about leaving. I could walk out, take the train back home, pretend I had been sick or caught in traffic. Isaac would understand. He always did. But then I remembered his face that morning before he left campus housing. He had FaceTimed me from his dorm room, nervous, adjusting his tie in the mirror. "You're coming, right?" he asked. I wouldn't miss it. He smiled, and there was something in his eyes that made me stay, a quiet weight, like he knew this day meant something deeper than a ceremony, like he was holding something in. So I stayed. The rows of graduates filed in, their black caps and gowns creating a sea of movement. I scanned every face searching for Isaac. When I finally saw him, my breath caught in my throat. He looked taller, more confident, and more grown than I'd ever seen him. He walked with his head high, scanning the crowd. His eyes landed on our section. I waved slightly, unsure if he saw me, then he smiled. A small smile, but it was real. It was for me. And just like that, I remembered why I was there. Not for Martin, not for Dolores, not for anyone else in that front row. I was there for him. But something about his smile stayed with me. It wasn't just joy. It was knowing. It was calm. It was steady in a way that made my heart beat faster, like he knew something was coming, like he was waiting for the right moment. I leaned forward in my chair. The dean returned to the podium. "It is my pleasure," he said, "to introduce this year's valedictorian, a student whose academic record, leadership, and integrity are unmatched. Please welcome Mr. Isaac Ramos Green." The crowd erupted in applause. Dolores clapped delicately. Martin clapped harder, looking around to see who was watching him. I sat motionless. Something about the way Isaac walked to that stage made me hold my breath. He wasn't nervous. He wasn't rushing. He moved like he had something to say that couldn't wait another second. And the moment he took the microphone in his hands, I knew the story was about to change. As Isaac reached the podium, the audience quieted. The applause faded into a gentle hush, that special kind of stillness that falls over a crowd just before something important happens. I sat straight in my chair, barely breathing, not knowing what he would say, but feeling in my chest that it was about to matter. He adjusted the microphone with steady hands. No note cards, no printed speech. He looked up and scanned the crowd, pausing just long enough to make people lean in. Then he smiled, not wide or showy, but calm and sure. My son looked calm in a way that made my pulse quicken. "I was asked to speak today about hard work," he said, "about what it means to overcome challenges, to earn your place." Heads turned toward him. A few parents nodded. Dolores sat with her hands clasped, her face tight and unreadable. Martin leaned back like he was soaking in the moment. Isaac continued, "I'm honored to be standing here. I know what this degree means. I know what it took. But it didn't just take my effort. It took someone else's." I felt something stir in my chest, a quiet tension, a thread being pulled. Isaac paused. Then he looked directly at me. His eyes didn't waver. He didn't blink. He saw me. "I want to take a moment to honor the person who made this possible," he said. "She's not in the front row. She's not sitting next to university donors or holding a camera. She didn't write a check or attend alumni dinners. But she gave more than anyone here." People around me began to turn their heads. "She worked 3 jobs," Isaac said, "so I wouldn't have to take out a single student loan. She worked overnight cleaning law offices. She waited tables on the weekends. And when she wasn't doing that, she was taking care of elderly patients just to keep the lights on." My hands trembled in my lap. My eyes stung. I kept telling myself not to cry, not here, not in front of them, but the truth was rushing in, louder than my shame could silence it. Isaac raised his voice slightly. "There were nights I'd wake up at 3 in the morning and hear her coming home, shoes soaked from walking in the rain, hands cracked from cleaning chemicals. She'd sit at the kitchen table and pay bills in silence. I pretended to be asleep, but I saw her. I always saw her." The silence in the stadium was total. Dolores shifted in her seat. Martin leaned forward, blinking like he hadn't heard right. Isaac still hadn't looked away from me. She didn't ask for praise. She never once used her struggle as an excuse. She just kept going. She put me first, every single day of my life. He reached into his pocket and unfolded a worn piece of paper. "When I was 6, I drew this," he said. "It's a crayon drawing of me and my mom in front of our old building. I wrote, 'I love my mom because she's strong. That strength is why I'm standing here today.'" He looked up. "Mom, can you stand for a moment?" The air was gone from my lungs. I didn't move. I couldn't. For a second, I froze, unsure if I had heard him right, unsure if I could stand up in front of all those people, especially the ones who had erased me with their words only minutes before. Then someone behind me gently touched my shoulder. "Go ahead," they whispered. I stood, slowly. My knees felt weak, but I stood. Isaac pointed. "That's my mother, Elena Ramos. She's the reason I'm here. Every late-night study session, every book, every meal I didn't have to worry about. That's her. She gave everything she had so I could have a shot." A wave of applause rose, first in pockets, then swelling into something bigger, louder, undeniable. People began clapping and turning toward me. Some stood. Others reached for their phones, probably recording the moment. I looked at Martin. He wasn't clapping. His face was blank. Dolores stared straight ahead, lips pressed into a hard line. Abigail had her hand on Martin's arm, but she wasn't smiling either. And I didn't care. I didn't care what they thought or what stories they told themselves, because in that moment I wasn't invisible. I wasn't the mistake or the afterthought or the ghost in the second row. I was his mother. I was seen. Isaac returned to his speech, but I couldn't hear the next few lines. My heart was too full, my vision blurred. I sat down slowly, my hands covering my mouth. The same woman behind me who had touched my shoulder leaned in again. "You must be so proud," she said. I nodded, unable to speak, because the thing I had never dared to expect had just happened. My son didn't just acknowledge me. He lifted me, and I knew nothing would ever be the same after that. I sat back down, my legs barely holding me. My chest rose and fell in deep, unsteady breaths. The applause had started to settle, but the echo of my son's words still rang louder than anything else. I could feel the shift. Something had changed in that room, and not just for me. Isaac stood at the podium looking calm, but his voice carried more weight now. Not just as a student, not just as a speaker, but as a man who had just drawn a line in the sand. "There are a lot of ways to define success," he said. "Some people look at money, connections, titles, but I look at sacrifice. I look at love that shows up when no one else does. I look at the people who build futures without needing to take credit for it." I watched faces in the crowd. People were listening differently now. A woman across the aisle wiped her eyes with a tissue. A man beside her placed his hand on his daughter's shoulder and gave her a small nod. Even strangers understood what Isaac was saying. And then, as if it had been planned, but I knew it hadn't, Dean Fletcher stepped up beside him. The dean was a tall man with kind eyes and a reputation for being both strict and deeply fair. He took the mic gently, turned to Isaac, and said, "Thank you for reminding all of us what this day truly represents." Then he turned toward the audience. "I want to echo something Mr. Ramos Green just said. Many of these students would not be here today without someone like the woman he spoke about. Too often, we celebrate achievements without acknowledging the quiet labor behind them. So today, I would like to officially dedicate this year's ceremony to the invisible champions, the parents, the guardians, the workers who chose sacrifice over comfort." He paused, then added, "And to Elena Ramos, thank you. You represent the very best of what this community stands for." This time the entire stadium rose. It wasn't just polite applause, it was thunder. People stood. Some clapped slowly, deliberately. Others shouted out in support. In that moment, I wasn't just Isaac's mother. I was a symbol of every person who had ever been dismissed, overlooked, or underestimated. I tried to keep my tears from falling, but I couldn't. They came anyway, hot, steady, and honest. I covered my mouth with my hand, overwhelmed. A woman a few rows down turned and smiled at me. Another leaned over to say, "That was beautiful." Dolores still hadn't moved. Her lips were pursed, her hands rested in her lap, fingers rigid. Martin sat like a man trying to process something he didn't quite understand. He clapped once, twice, unsure whether to keep going. His face had none of the pride it held before. He looked sideways at Abigail, who avoided his eyes. None of it mattered anymore. Isaac walked off the stage and disappeared behind the curtain. The next speaker was introduced, but I wasn't listening. My heartbeat was too loud. I felt lightheaded but grounded, weightless but solid. It was as if the years of carrying this burden alone had suddenly lifted, just enough for me to breathe without guilt. And for the first time in a long time, I breathed freely. When the ceremony ended, the crowd poured into the courtyard. People took photos under banners, hugged their graduates, handed out flowers. I waited near the back, not wanting to interrupt anyone, not sure if I belonged in the family photo. Then I saw him. Isaac was moving quickly through the crowd, his cap off, eyes scanning every face. When he spotted me, his whole body lit up. "Mom," he said, his voice cutting through the noise like a warm wind. He reached me in 2 long strides and pulled me into the tightest hug I'd ever felt. "You stayed," he whispered. "I told you I would." He pulled back to look at me. I meant what I said. I needed them to know. I was tired of pretending you weren't the reason. I nodded, unable to speak. I just held his face in my hands like I used to when he was small and sick with fever, and I didn't have money for medicine. I held him the same way then, quietly, gratefully, completely. Behind him, Martin approached slowly. He was smiling, but it was awkward, forced. "Isaac," he said, "that was a great speech, really powerful. You surprised us." Isaac's smile faded just slightly. He turned toward his father, then stepped closer to me. "I didn't do it to surprise you. I did it because it was the truth." Martin cleared his throat. "Right, of course. I mean, we all helped in some way." Isaac didn't flinch. "No, Dad, you didn't." He turned to me again and said, "You ready to go? They have a reception for the graduates and families. I saved you a seat." For the first time in my life, in front of my ex-husband and the woman who had spent years judging me, I felt no shame. I felt chosen. I felt victorious. And as I walked beside my son, my head held high, I knew that I no longer had to explain myself to anyone. My story had finally been told, not by me, but by the one who mattered most. The reception was held on the rooftop garden of one of the newer campus buildings. Strings of lights hung above white tables, and jazz played softly through speakers tucked into the flower beds. People stood in clusters, balancing plates of hors d'oeuvres and glasses of lemonade. The atmosphere was light, proud, filled with congratulations and laughter. Isaac stayed close to me. Every few minutes, someone came up to shake his hand or take a picture. More than once, someone would glance at me, pause, and then say, "You must be his mom." Their tone always softened when they said it, like they understood now, like they saw me in a way they hadn't before. I didn't need their approval. I hadn't for a long time. But I won't lie. It felt good to be recognized, to not have to explain, to not have to defend, just to be present, standing beside my son as he was celebrated, and knowing I belonged in the photo, not behind it. At one point, Isaac turned to me with a plate of food and said, "I know you probably haven't eaten all day." He handed it to me with a quiet smile. "You used to do that, work through lunch, skip dinner. You always said it was fine, that you weren't hungry." I didn't say anything at first. I just looked at him. My little boy, who used to sleep with his head on my arm and ask me if monsters were real, now watching over me with the same protectiveness I had once given him. "I never wanted you to worry," I said. "I did worry," he replied. "But I also knew I was safe, that you'd figure it out. You always did." A part of me still carried the years of guilt, the birthdays with just one cupcake, the winter he needed a new coat and I cried in the back room of the diner because I could only afford a scarf, the field trips I couldn't chaperone, the open houses I came to straight from work, hair tied back, hands smelling like bleach, but he remembered none of those things with resentment, only gratitude. After the reception, we walked through the campus together. It was quiet now, most people heading to dinners or hotels. The sun was lower, casting long shadows over the red brick paths. "This place feels different now," I said. "It is," he replied. "You changed the way I'll remember it." We sat on a bench near the science building. He pulled the graduation cap from his bag and set it in my lap. "I want you to keep this," he said. "You earned it." He shook his head. "We earned it. And I want it to live where I came from. Not in a dorm, Not in some apartment I'll move out of in a year. I want it to be with you. I held the cap in my hands, turning it slowly. I didn't need a trophy, but I held that cap like it was everything we had survived. Every shift, every sleepless night, every quiet win we never got to celebrate until now. He leaned back and looked up at the sky. I used to think I had to make it big so I could prove something. To Dad, to the world, even to you. But I don't feel that way anymore. You don't have to prove anything, I said. He turned to me. That's what today taught me. The only thing worth proving is that love matters, that sacrifice matters, and that the people who show up quietly every day deserve more than we ever give them. We sat there for a while, just the two of us, and in the stillness of that late afternoon, something inside me settled, a knot that had been tied for years slowly unraveled. I had spent so much of my life believing that silence meant failure, that because no one had thanked me, I hadn't done enough. But I was wrong. Love doesn't always come with applause. Sometimes it comes with a plate of food handed to you when no one else notices you're hungry. Sometimes it's a graduation cap placed in your lap without ceremony, but with a heart full of truth. Sometimes it's a son standing on a stage and pointing, not to the people in the front row, but to the woman who sat quietly in the back and built his future 1 hour at a time. I used to wonder if my life would ever feel whole, if the parts of me I had given away would come back in some form. That day, they did. Not in money, not in praise, but in the steady gaze of my son, who saw every invisible thing I ever did and chose to speak it into the world. That was my reward. That was my healing. That was my victory. And I will carry it for the rest of my life. If this story moved you even just a little, take a moment to think about the quiet heroes in your life, the ones who gave everything without asking for anything in return. Maybe it was your mother, your father, a grandparent, a teacher, or someone who simply showed up when no one else did. They may not sit in the front row, they may not get the credit, but without them, we wouldn't be who we are. If this story meant something to you, please like this video. It helps more people hear stories that matter. Share it with someone who needs to be seen. Comment below and tell us about the silent hero in your life. And if you want more stories like this, real, raw, and true, subscribe to the channel and join a community that honors what's often overlooked, because the quiet sacrifices deserve to be heard. Thank you for watching. I see you, I appreciate you, and I hope you never forget. You mattered, even when no one said it.